In this video, we're going to have a look at how the sales process inside of CRM works. So that means quotes, orders, and invoices. So there's a couple of different ways that we can initiate those actions. So if we come into a company record, provided we have the box ticked to signify that that company is a customer, we'll be able to access the sales functions in the system. So down here, that means that we've got a tab for quotes, sales orders and invoices, as well as payments. And we can also see all the items that were placed on invoices, sales orders and quotes. So I can come in here and add a new quote or add a quote from a template, which I'll explain in a moment. So that's the first way of doing it. If the customer is a contact record, we can basically come through and open up that particular record. And as long as we have that box ticked again, saying to CRM that this is a customer, we'll be able to have those sales tabs here. So I can again go and initiate a quote, a sales order, or an invoice and see the full history of what's happened. The other way that we can get them into the system is via an opportunity. So opportunities are your lead or your sales pipeline in the system. So we can basically open an opportunity, and provided that the customer has that little box ticked saying that they are indeed a customer, we'll be able to access the sales tabs here. So we can go and input quotes, sales orders and invoices directly from the opportunity. So it all forms one neat little package from inquiry straight through to sales and then finally to payments. The other way that we can do it is by coming into the sales area here and coming into quotes, orders or invoices and just clicking on the new button. So there's a couple of different ways that we can approach that. Now, before we delve into these three areas any further, what I'm going to talk to you about is some things that you'll need to set up at a system level that will then be relevant once we get stuck in. So if we come down into admin here, we've got this area called web settings. So in CRM, you've got two options for your quotes, sales orders and invoices. You can have an online web version, you can have a PDF version, or you can send the customer both of those. So those will need to be configured before you start working with sales. So in this web settings area, this is where you set up your web templates. So we've got a quote one, a sales order one, and an invoice one. So there's a separate video on how to go and set those up. So just to let you know that that's where these live and that's where the system is pulling them from. Underneath our web settings, we've got this area here called templates. So when we're working with sales, it can also relate to email templates, SMS templates, quote templates, and PDF templates. So PDF templates for your quotes, sales orders and invoices, you can go and customize the templates yourself. So if you don't like the automated system ones, you can go and play around with the formatting, the merge codes, etc. and customize those to your liking from this PDF templates area. You can also create email templates and SMS templates. So that means that we're sending out our quotes, orders and invoices. We can do so with a pre-formatted template that is going to save us a little bit of time. Now, the benefit with those templates is that we can add merge codes to them. So we can basically pull through the customer's name, invoice amounts, quote expiry dates, etc., any sort of relevant information in CRM into that email template automatically. So it's the same for an SMS template. So if we wanted to quickly send somebody a web quote, we can basically put that URL into a template. So all you need to do is click on the SMS button, select the template, and you're off and running. Now, quote templates here means something different to the PDF template for the quote and the web quote settings that we looked at a second ago. So what this means is a quote form template. So you'll see that when I'm in quotes here, I've got the new button, which will just give me a blank form to start building out with my details for that particular customer. Or when I come back to the main screen here, you'll also see that I have a quote from template option. So what that means is instead of starting from a blank form, I can pre-format a quote form template and select that. So in here, I can see previous templates that I've set up earlier. So if I pick my mixing bakery pack template here and load that into the system, what it's going to come with is all of the items that I've pre-configured. So I can go and change descriptions, prices, move things up and down, get the quote looking exactly the same way that I want, and then go and create a quote quickly using that template. So this quote templates area is where we create those templates. So if I click on my mixing bakery pack in here, you can see that I've pre-formatted this with a range of details. So I can select which online template I'd like to use, whether or not prices include tax. I can set payment terms. I can set a sell from location, a price type. I can also set a deposit On orders, I can give it a name, assign it to somebody, and go and pre-configure all of my items. So that's going to be really handy if you frequently quote packages of items or have very long quotes. So rather than starting from scratch each time, you can basically go and create a template and then go and create a quote using that template quickly and easily. One of the other options that we've got is if I open an existing quote, we have a copy button here. So a customer might come back in 6 months' time and say, I just want the same as what I ordered before. So we could pull up their existing quote and just copy that as a new one. Or we could find a long and complex quote and go and create a template using that quote. So again, that's going to cut down on your admin. So you can go and pull up a couple of previous examples of long and complex quotes and then just save those in the system as a template. So you'll see on orders, we've also got the same button here that we can go and open an order and basically copy that over to a new order. So again, that's going to save time if customers reorder the same things on a regular basis. So once you've got all of your templates set up and ready to go, we can then go and look at the sales process in a little bit more detail. So we've looked at there's a number of different ways to initiate sales in the system. What we'll look at now is taking a quote to an invoice and through to shipping the goods out to the customer. Now, there's no obligation to start from a quote. You can jump into the process at any point that you want. So maybe you don't do quotes and we jump straight to a sales order, or maybe someone walks in to pick up goods over the counter and we just want to issue an invoice. So there's no obligation to start from quotes. You can jump in at whichever point suits you. There's also some other system settings that will affect how these records behave. So in admin and general, we've got a couple of sections in here where we can set some system preferences. So in here, we have an area called quote settings. So in here, we can set the default validity date for quotes. So maybe that's 15 days, maybe it's 20, it's 30, etc. And we can go and set that so that on all of our quotes, the system will automatically calculate the system will automatically calculate the correct validity date for that quote. What we can also do is choose whether or not CRM will automate the process for us between a quote all the way to an invoice, or whether we'd like to retain manual control over that. So what I mean by that is when we open up a quote, and I'll just go and search for a new one in the system here. Over here, we have a couple more settings. So this default can accept online basically means that when we're adding a quote into the system, there is a box on each quote that says can accept online. So if that box is ticked, the customer will be able to accept the order online. If it's not, they can view it, but they can't accept it. So if we want all our customers to be able to accept these online, we can go and turn that on at a system level so that that box is always ticked and we don't need to remember to do it. We can always untick it for a customer if we want to. This simple quote acceptance box basically is the difference between whether CRM will automate the process between a quote and an invoice, or whether we'd like to retain manual control over that. So what I mean by that is if we come back here and open up a new quote that hasn't been accepted yet, on here we can see a manual button where we can push this over to a sales order, and from the sales order we can then go and create an invoice whenever we'd like to with a similar button. What CRM can do is if we send the online quote to the customer and they accept it online, CRM can automatically create a sales order and an invoice for us. So that's basically going to cut down on admin time. So if you don't want that to be the case, you can select simple quote acceptance. So that means that when a customer accepts an order online, all CRM will do is go and mark this quote off as accepted. It's then up to you to go and convert it to a sales order and then convert that sales order to an invoice. So you can basically automate that process or retain manual control over it. Coming back to the settings page, we've also got some other options in here. So if we're using bills of materials, so there's products that we manufacture and we'll be using work orders and the manufacturing area in CRM. We can choose whether or not when we add a manufactured item to a quote, that gets expanded to include all the BOM materials on a sales order. So we can tick that box if we want that to be the case. Down here, we've also got this invoice settings area. So you should make sure that you've got your ABN, ACN and bank details in here if you want those to come across to your PDF invoices and into your online templates. What we can also choose here are a couple of different options. So if we have items on back order, do we want to include them on invoices and have them shown? So ticking that box means that it's a yes. We can also choose whether or not we're displaying GL codes on our invoices so that we can see those while we're working with them. We can also turn on different features related to shipments in here. So what we can do is basically say that when we create a shipment, do nothing, and we'll manually create the invoice to accompany that shipment. We can also turn on auto invoicing. So basically, depending what we ship, CRM will go and create an invoice automatically for the goods on that shipment. We can also prevent shipments from being created for certain orders or show a warning if one's about to be created. So we've got a little bit of control over that process there. We can also send shipment confirmations, and you'll notice as soon as I tick that box, I get an option here to select an email template for that purpose. So that means that when items are shipped, you can add a shipping contact to your sales so that they will receive an email with details of the shipment that are coming. We can also specify progressive payments if we'd like to. So we can set deposits as either a dollar amount or a percentage so that when we're going and adding them to orders, we can specify how that they go in. So I'm going to turn that one over to a percentage. We can also enable this progressive revenue. So that means that we can have multiple invoices against an order. So we might want to charge the customer progressively for something, and enabling this will allow you to go and input a payment schedule into the system. So when you make any changes to this page, it's important to note that we scroll down the bottom and click on the update button to apply those changes. So coming back in, let's kick off the process with a quote and let's take that all the way through to an outbound shipment. So I'll click on the new quote button up here to start from scratch with a blank form. So what happens if the customer or the lead already doesn't have a record as a company or a contact in CRM? So that's not a problem. What we can do in that case is create the records on the fly by doing it inline. So it means that you don't have to stop, go and create the record, then come back and do the quote. So when I'm looking for a company or a contact, I can click here, I can scroll through the list, or I can start typing in a search and see what results it brings up. So we can see here that a company called Battlestar Galactica is not in the system, but I can click here to add it. And as soon as I did that, I've got this little new button over here, and it's given me a couple of fields to throw in. So if somebody calls up and wants to put through a quote with me on the phone, I can grab their phone number, their email, some of their relevant details, and throw that company into the system on the fly. So the same thing will happen in the contact area. So we can scroll through here. If we've chosen a company, it will automatically limit the contacts to ones that are linked to that particular company. If not, we can go and do the same thing and say, right, that contact is not already in the system, and we can go and add it. And same thing, it's just given me a couple of extra fields that I can fill in with some details here. Now, underneath when I was talking about those shipment confirmations earlier, we can go and set a shipment contact here. So that person will automatically be notified when we send out shipments. If the customer already exists in the system, there's a range of different preferences that you can set on the customer record so that they flow through to all quotes, orders, and invoices. So that saves you every single time inputting their payment details, the currency they use, their price types, etc. So on a customer record, you can set all of that up so that it will automatically populate through when the customer is selected on quotes, orders, and invoices. So in here, this has automatically assigned it to me because I'm the one inputting the record, but I can go and change that assignment to another salesperson. If you have multiple different locations that you sell from, you can pick one of the locations from here. And we can also pick a default price type. So in my system, that's set to retail. But if the customer was already set up and had wholesale rates, it would have defaulted to that. So I can go and pick the pricing level that's going to apply. I can input a customer PO number, and the customer can also do that themselves from the online quote that I'll show you. So we've got payment terms here. That validity date is being calculated, as we saw, based on whatever your preference is set up in the system. We've got the can accept online box that's been ticked by default, so the customer is going to be able to see that online. And we've also got a source of business field here that you can customize so that you can basically track the origin of your sales. So you can get into that field in this admin section. We scroll down, we open settings, and we come down here to sales, and we'll see the source of business field. So we can populate that with whatever options are applicable to your business. In here, we can also select the web or online template that we're going to use for this particular quote. So we can set a default in our system, which will apply. So in that case, it's the Fine Foods one. And if I want to change that, I can go and make another selection here. I can also set a follow-up date for this quote and a follow-up assignee. So typically this assigned to box is the salesperson, so that in all of the reporting, they're going to get the credit for this particular quote. We might want the quote to be followed up by a different person, but ensure that the salesperson still gets their credit. So for that reason, we can go and set a follow-up date and set another person to be responsible for the follow-up of that record. So on the 9th, when Andy logs into CRM, the bird of notifications will chirp very loudly at her and tell her that she has a quote to follow up. So you can see here I've got quite a few follow-ups in the system, but that will basically show here and say, right, click through to hop onto the quote and follow it up. As we looked at before, we can set the currency at a customer level and have that pull through in here. We can also add an expected close date. So we can use that in conjunction with our follow-up date to make sure we're going and following up people for quotes within reasonable timeframes. Under here, we can also go and link this quote to a project, an opportunity, a campaign, or a ticket. We've also got a probability box in here that in conjunction with the expected close and the follow-up date is giving you depth of information. So we could then go and sort through our quotes based on how likely they are to proceed, what the expected close date is and follow-up date, and build some filters around that so that we can come up with little workflow lists of quotes. What we can also do is allow a deposit on an order. So if I tick that box, when I went and changed that in the system settings earlier, I changed it from a dollar to a percentage amount. So I can say I need a 20% deposit on this order and that's due next week. If I'd enabled the progressive revenue function, what I would have is a progressive revenue box here that I could tick, and I could basically go and add payments to a schedule. So I can set up the payments that are going to be received in future so that I can then generate multiple invoices for them. If you're playing around with CRM and you don't necessarily want this record to export to your accounting system, you can tick the do not export box and just pop in a reason why. So that means that that record will be siloed inside of CRM. So that's really good if you're testing the system and putting in fake quotes for yourself or invoices, sales orders. We can basically go and leave it so that it stays just inside of CRM. If the customer had an address, it would have populated that through, but because I'm adding a new customer on the fly, we don't have that in there. Now that I'm down to my items section, I can go and start adding things to the quote. So this is where quote templates are helpful because I can already have this pre-configured with a range of items that I sell on a regular basis. So in this case, I'm going to go and pick some cupcakes. So you'll notice that when I add an item, I can either scroll through this list, but if you've got thousands of products, that's probably not feasible. So I can start typing in the top there and it will bring up relevant results that match that. So I can pop in the part number or the product name and basically see which ones come up. So I can keep going and adding different options in here. So I might just add a plain cupcake. So I've got all of my options here. I can go and add the quantities to the order. So we'll do 2 of those, 2 of those, 2 of those. And we can also add in discounts. We can alter the pricing. So the pricing that's coming through here will be set on the customer's price type and will also depend on whether you've set up any special pricing, particularly for that customer. So CRM is showing me how many I have available at the moment. So that's not a problem. I can go and create those later to sell them. So I might want to put in a discount in here as well. And I can also go and amend the product information that has come through. So I might want to put a custom note in here. I might want to delete this altogether. And you'll see that in these boxes, information that you've set up on your product records will pull through. If I want to change that, I can just go in and delete something here, or I can click on this little green square to open the text editor. So what I can do is go and put notes and different points in here about the product. And then I can go and change things so that maybe that's bold, maybe that's italics, maybe we need this to be in red, and maybe I also want to add some bullet points in here as well. So we can add hyperlinks, we can add images, various different things, and you can see my changes have been made in there. If I want to move items up or down in priority, I can use these buttons over here and push the vanilla cupcake down, push this plain one to the top, and basically use those buttons to move things around. If I've got a lot going on the screen, I can expand these to give me a little bit more room and I can contract them, etc. I can also remove an item just by hitting this delete button over on the side here. Now what you'll see is we've got the option here to hide a line and hide a price. I can't do that for the first item on a quote, an order, or a sales order, but I can do that for subsequent items. So this can be handy where there's a cost built into the products or services that you're selling that we don't particularly need to itemize for the customer, but we do want reflected in the overall total. So what I could do is hide this line and hide the price from the customer. So the total price of these cupcakes will still be reflected in the total, but we're not itemizing that specifically. So you can turn that on or off. What you'll also see is for each item over on the side here, we've got a gross profit and a gross margin section for information here. So this means that based on the cost price for your products in the system and the price that you're selling at, and the discount that I've given in this case, CRM has calculated that my gross profit on this item is $3.70, which is equal to 64.91%. So it will do that for each of the items in here. Once I've saved this, it will also add up what my gross profit and margin is overall for the order. So this just gives you a little bit of visibility when you're quoting so that you can go and adjust your pricing. What you can do is if not all staff need to see this information, these margins and the cost price, you can also hide that from the view if required. So once I've added my items, I can also come down and add some further information. So maybe I've got some customer notes that are specific to the order that I want to be visible to the customer. I can show that here. I can have some internal notes in here. So we can basically say, likely to proceed and pop that into the box so that internally just we can see that. I can also set delivery instructions. So we'll call Bill on the mobile before arrival, and I can pop that in there so that that's on the customer version and that's also on our internal versions. And you can see I've also got the text editor in all these boxes as well. So we can also set up delivery instructions on the customer record so that that will pull through to sales every time we use them. So now that I've completed all of my details, I can click on Save and Close, and that's going to bring up the saved quote record. So you can see here, I've got the total profit up here and the margin for that order in total. And you can also see that I've got that deposit amount that's set up as well. So in here, we can see our items, we can do a final review and make sure that we're happy with it. And then we've got a couple of ways that we can send this to the customer. So the first way is clicking up here for Preview as Customer, which will open the web quote. So this is the online quote template that you can go and set up in your system, and you can have as many of those as you need. So what this is doing is showing the customer, right, these are all the details, and you can see that line that I'd hidden for the chocolate cupcakes isn't visible, but the total is still taking those into account. The modifications that I'd made here with the formatting have carried through. The customer notes that I put are also showing up the top here. So what we can do is accept the quote, and you can also put in your terms and conditions so that they show in a box or as a chunk of text at the bottom of the quote. So when you're setting up your online quote templates, you've got some control over that. What can happen before the customer basically accepts that order is they have a question. So what they can do is pop that into the box down here and say, I have a question. So that's updated the quote. What will happen is in CRM, the status of the quote is set to current. Once I refresh that and it gets the information that the customer's made a comment, it will update that to customer comment. What then happens is the timeline of the record, we can see that that question has been pulled through. as the salesperson, it's also sending me an email to alert me that the customer has asked a question. So once I get that email, I can hop in here and basically go and add the answer. Hit save, and you can see that the email is on the timeline here, my answer is on the timeline, and when the customer comes back and opens the quote or refreshes it, we can see the Q&A is captured there. So that's really handy if you're having a back and forth or there's some haggling going on. That can all form part of the same record. And when I've replied to this, the system will also send an email to the customer saying that there's been a response to their question. So that's really handy. The other way that we can send the quote to the customer is as a PDF. So in here, we've got this preview button. So we can click on quote here and bring up the PDF version. So this one's fairly Spartan. It's not particularly attractive, but we're getting the idea that we can spit out a PDF as well. It's brought through my notes, my formatting, etc., and I can add my terms and conditions to it. So when it comes to sending that to the customer, we've got a couple of different options. We can email them out, and we can basically include the online quote URL. And so this is where email templates come in handy, because we can pre-format that with the account name, and so that automatically pulls through that URL for the quote. We can also click here to copy that URL and paste it somewhere else. So maybe we want to send an email from Outlook or tag a colleague in it. So we can copy it here, or the system can pull that through as a merge code. We can also attach the PDF version if we want to, or we can deselect this box. So we can basically send it out a couple of ways. We can also send an SMS by putting that same URL into an email template so that we can quickly send that out to a customer. So they get the message on their phone, they click on it, they open the web quote, and they can accept that online. So when we was talking before about whether we want to retain manual control over the system or whether we want it to automate, this is where that would apply. So you can see here, I can convert this over to a sales order. So I can click that button manually. But if the customer comes in here and accepts the quote online, so we'll pop in the purchase order number, we'll add a signature in here and we'll click on accept order. So CRM has now locked that against further changes. If we come back in here, the status of the quote has been updated from customer comment to accepted. So we've got that up here, and that's just a notification that my email has failed to send. So I've said that I want to retain manual control over this process. So now that the customer has accepted it, I as the salesperson also get an email saying, hey, congratulations, they've accepted the quote. So I can now push that over, and you can see here it's stored the customer signature. So when they've signed that in the online quote, that's come through to form part of the quote record. So we've got our Q&A, our back and forth in here, and we've got the signature as well. So I can now click here to push that over to a sales order. So before I leave, because the quote, the order, and the invoice are all very similar, they all have this activity bar across the top here. So I can go and put in some notes to do with this quote. I can go and send follow-up emails. I can log my calls here. I can set tasks, etc. And I can basically use this timeline the same way that I would any area in CRM. So if I click now to go and convert this over to a sales order, it will basically transfer all of the information across, and you'll see up here in the corner, I now have a link to the original quote. So if I want to look at the quote and the sales order at the same time, I can just click here and open that in a new tab. And you'll see the quote now has a link to the sales order. So I can really quickly get to associated records. The other thing that I can do, as well as accessing associated records from this link up here, is also open the customer records. So CRM's gone and created a company and a contact for me because they didn't exist in the system. I can click here to open that company record in a new tab and basically go and review that if I'd like to. I can also open the contact record in a new tab and view that if I want to. So you're never more than sort of a click or two away from relevant information. So now we're in a sales order. This has brought us into the sales and orders section. So it's brought through all of the information, including my margin, my deposit, the client PO number that was put into the online version, and we've got all of the notes that we put in earlier, and it's brought across all of the items, the pricing, and the formatting that we had. So different to a quote, we've got a couple of extra tabs here. So we've got the standard timeline, but we've also got a tab for shipments so that we can track how this order and when it has been sent out. If the customer is returning goods, we've also got a tab for returns. So we can see that it's very similar to the quote in that we've got this toolbar across the top here, but we've got some additional options. So in here, I can generate shipments. I can also generate returns. And you'll see that as I don't have any of these items available in my system, CRM has automatically put them all on back order for me. So what that means is I then need to go and make some more items so that I can sell them. So I manufacture these cupcakes myself. So in here, I could go and generate a work order for the cupcakes, or if it's an item that I'm ordering into the business from a supplier, I could go and initiate a purchase order. So that would basically give me a work order tab or a purchase order tab here so that I can see the associated records. Once the production process is complete and I've made the cupcakes or I've ordered them in from a supplier and they've come in, I can then come back to the order and release the back orders. So in here, we can just see generate if we want to create a job for this as well. So maybe we're selling goods to the customer that we're going to go and install on site. We could go and set up an installation job from this as well so that the order is linked to the job. So again, we're building that thread between the records so that we can quickly and easily access associated information. So just like our quote, there are a couple of different ways that we can view this. So we can use this same preview as customer here. And so I'll just go and select which template I want to use. So in here, I can go and select my web template. So I'll go and pick that one here. And then once I click on this, it will open that up in a new tab. So we can basically send that out to the customer in the same way. We can email the URL. We can also preview this as a PDF document. And we've got the option to send either or both of those records out to the customer. What you'll also notice is when I clicked on this preview button here, as well as being able to see the PDF sales order, we've also got a delivery docket and a picking list. So I can go and generate those PDFs as well from my sales order so that maybe I need to print this out and attach it to the order or give that to another member of staff. So we can go and generate a number of PDF documents from here. Now, if I need to make any changes to the order at this point, I can. So I just click on this edit button and basically put it into edit mode, and then I can go and change any of the options on here. So I might want to add an item, remove an item, etc. So what I might go and do is add something that I actually do have in stock so that we'll be able to send them. So you can see it's giving me stock information on the spot here. So I need 4 and it's telling me I've got 46.5 available in the system, so stock's not an issue. Whereas these other ones here, the system is automatically placed on back order because I don't have enough stock available for them. So I can now hit save and close on that, and it has updated my totals and my margins in line with that new information. So from here, I can then go and invoice the order. Now, because I asked for a deposit on this order, I can generate 2 invoices. First, the deposit invoice, and then when I'm ready, a final invoice. So that will basically take into account the deposit that's been paid. So I will have 2 invoices listed against this order. When I'm ready to ship the goods, I can go and generate shipments from here, and I can have as many shipments as I need. You don't have to send everything in one lot. But as we saw before, I can also turn on the auto shipping feature that basically whenever I ship something, the system will automatically invoice for the amount that I've shipped. So you can basically play around with those options to suit your preferences. So in this case, I'm going to go and generate a deposit invoice. So I'll confirm that. That's now gone and opened a new invoice for me, which is linked to my sales order. So I can jump back to the sales order and you can see I now have a link to the deposit invoice. So I can open that in a new window. I can get back to the quote. So I can basically move backwards and forwards from this sales order to the associated records. So once that deposit has been paid, I can then go and issue a final invoice for the customer. So once the deposit has been paid, I could then go and generate the final invoice to the customer. But what I'll do now is ship the items because they've paid a deposit, so I'm going to send a partial shipment out. So in here, I'll select generate shipment. what the system will do is go and create me an SH record, which is the shipment, and that will appear in the outbound shipments area of CRM. And you can see here that I can also quickly get back to the sales order if I need to. And it's also pulled through the delivery instruction details that I had on the sales order, which also came over from the quote. Now in here, because it knows that all of those cupcakes are on back order, the only items that I actually have available to ship at the moment are the eggs. So I could send all 4 of them, but I could also go and change that and say, look, I'll send 2 now, and then I'll send the rest later when I send the cupcakes. So I can basically go and change the items or remove items if I'm not going to send them all at once. I can also add freight costs into the system here. So if you're connected with MacShip, you'll be able to do live freight quoting, and you'll also be able to generate consignments automatically from here that go straight through to your freight and transport providers. This record also has a timeline, and we've also got a tracking tab here that's going to give us some information about the shipment. So as well as the activity bar here, you can see we've got the preview PDF option that gives us a few different options here. So I can generate a delivery docket if I want to. I can also get back to the same picking list that I could generate from the sales order, and I can also generate a stock label if I want to. Now in here, this is basically sitting automatically as to be picked. So what I can do is then go and say, right, this order has been picked. And you can see here, it's added that to the tracking tab, and it's also given me the picking information up here, saying who picked it and what time and date that was done. I can also go and mark this one as packed, and it will do the same thing. You can see it's updating the status to packed. It's updating my little audit trail here, and it's also added it to the tracking tab. And then I can finally go and mark that one as shipped. So you can see that's now been updated. The status of the order of the shipment is now shipped, and I've got that full audit history here. So what I can do is hop back into my sales order, and we can now come to the shipments tab. So we can see that that shipment is now showing there, and it's marked off as shipped and 2 of the items were sent. What's also happened is in the items here, it's also updated the information based on what's been shipped. So I had a quantity of 4. There's 4 committed to the order. 2 of them have been shipped, but 2 remain to be shipped. So I can also see from the shipment records and from the information here what's gone and what's yet to be sent. You'll also notice that on the order itself, there's 2 statuses. So first of all, there's the status of the order. So this one is basically sitting on back order because I don't have any of those cupcakes available. What you've also got here is a shipment status. So that's now automatically been updated to partially shipped because I've shipped some of the order and the rest of it is on back order. So when I'm ready, and I've got my cupcakes available, I can come back in here, release those back orders, generate another shipment, and generate a final invoice. And then I'm off and running, and I can send all that out to the customer. What we'll now look at is what happens if a customer wants to return goods or we need to put a credit note into the system. So down here, I can come over to returns and generate a return. So the system will ask me, so now that that process is complete, we've taken a quote to be accepted online by the customer, then pushed that to an order, we've shipped out some of the items, and we've issued a deposit invoice. So now, if I hop into the customer record, you can see that their sales information over on the side here has been updated. We can also see the Q&A from the quote has been pulled over to their timeline. We've now got the quote showing in here, the items that were put onto the quote. We've got the sales order in here, the items that were put on to the sales order. So I went and added the eggs at that point. We can also see the shipment that's been generated. We can also see the invoice for the customer, the items that were on the invoice. So that's basically the deposit I was taking. And then when the customer makes a payment, that will show here. So taking a payment can happen a couple of different ways. So when the customer accepts their order online, what they can do is basically be taken straight through to a payment screen. So if you've hooked up CRM to one of the payment gateways, eWay, Stripe, or Easy Debit, when the customer clicked accept on that online quote, they can be taken straight through to a payment screen to pay the deposit or the full amount. The customer could also call through and provide you with their details, in which case we could go and enter in credit card details into the system here. So this particular system I've got hooked up to Stripe. Once those details were added, I would be able to click on that Stripe logo again and go to arrange the payment of a couple of invoices. If your payments are coming through to your accounting system, so Xero or MyOb, you'll want to make sure that those are being synced into CRM on a daily basis so that the payments come into the system, get matched against the customer, and also mark off the invoices. So if we hop in now and take a further look at the deposit invoice, we can see here that we can also get back to the sales order from here. So we can see our margin information, and because the only thing I was doing at this point was taking a deposit, it's basically automatically added this as a deposit item. So on the invoice, we've got the same options that we did on a quote and on a sales order. So we can basically send the customer an online version. So once I go and select my template in the system, hit save and close, and then come up and preview that as the customer would see it. So what we see here is I've also got a payment button. So if I send this out to the customer, they can click here and basically go and make a payment that will come straight through to CRM. So that's where you need one of those payment gateways to be connected. So I can copy that URL. I can have the URL automatically added to an email template so that it pushes it through. I can also go and issue a PDF copy of it as well, the same way that I could for other orders. And I can email or SMS those out. So I can go and email out the web version as well as the PDF version if I want. I can also text out a link to the web version of the invoice so the customer can get that on their phone and just go and pay the invoice on the spot. What you'll also see is I've got a payment button here. So if the customer comes in and makes a payment over the counter with cash, I could just go and throw a payment in against that. On the invoice itself, you'll see that I have a payments tab here. So all of the payments that relate to this invoice will be attached here. And I've also got a timeline the same way that I do with other records. What you can do is set up repeating invoices. So if you've got a case where you're invoicing a customer each month or each quarter, you can set up a recurring invoice so that you'd be able to see the series of the invoices through here. So again, you'll see that it's very, very similar to what we looked at with the quote and the sales order. And we've just got some slightly different options because this is an invoice. Now, a couple of handy features that we've got that will help you throughout this entire process. If we hop into invoices here, we now have the option to send all invoices. So it could be the case, you can see I've got quite a few here that are sitting in the issued status that haven't yet been sent out to a customer. So I've got 56. So rather than me spending quite some time going in and out of each one and emailing these out to the customers, I can just select them all and go send invoices, and that will send it out to the appropriate contacts. So that will let you do it in bulk. What we can also do is say that I wanted to print out all those invoices at once. I can click this button. That will open, I'll just select a few of them so that it doesn't take too long. That will basically open these in a PDF and allow me to go and print these off instead of going in and out of each record to open them up. So I'll just give that a second to load. So you can see it's gone and printed all of those invoices. Some of them are on different templates, and I can go and print those out, or I can save them if I want to. What I can also do is bulk update the records. So what I might want to do is go and reassign all of those invoices to myself as the salesperson. So I could go and select them, click on update, and go and choose the assign to field and go and assign them all to myself. So that's thinking about it for a second, and we'll see that the change is made in the assign to column as soon as that's completed. So there we go. Now they're all assigned to me in the system. What I can also do is add tags to invoices, and the same applies to quotes and orders. So I can basically open an invoice here, and I've got some tags already set up in the system. So I can say that maybe this is a difficult customer. Please talk to me before sending this out. And I can add that so that it shows prominently at the top of the record. And then I can also sort through my invoices by which customers have which tags. What we'll also see, it's the same for quotes, orders, and invoices, is that up the top we have a couple of different view selectors here. So what that means, I'll just get rid of my filter out of here. I can see all my invoices in list view, and I'll get rid of my search on there as well. or I can view all of the invoices on the map according to the address information that's in there. So you can see the further I zoom out, I can see where all of my invoices are, and I can click on an area to zoom in and see more about where particular ones are located. I've also got Kanban view in here. So this is going to sort my invoices by the status they are in the system, and I can go and pick and choose which statuses are shown there. So what I can also quickly do from this point is go and drag and drop things between different statuses. So this is just another way of quickly updating records in bulk without having to go into each of them individually. So I can go and drag this over to the sent stage. I could drag it to partially paid. I could push it back to entered, etc. And I can drag and drop things between different columns. The last option I have here is the dashboard view. So once I open this, up in the top right hand corner, I can select from a range of different dashboards in the system. So what we might look at is the invoice summary, but we're going to change the date range for this. So I'll say calendar year, and I'm going to push that back to 2020. So we've got a nice little breakdown of what was happening in the system. The dashboards are also interactive. So I can go and click on my name there, and it will drill down into the information in here. So I can click and keep drilling into the information as much as I'd like to. And then I can basically go and clear those selections from the system. So I can go and pick from any number of different dashboards in the system. So if we look at invoices by month, I can go and change the date range as it's appropriate. So we might want to look at that for last year instead. There's my graph. So you've got that option in orders and also in quotes as well. So that's a really good way to get an overview of what's happening in your system. So you'll see when I come into orders, we've also got the update and the add tag option. We can also print our sales orders in bulk, just the same way that we could with invoices. And if you've enabled the ability to manage your own deliveries in the system, you'll have this delivery run option, and you'll also have a calendar view. So I've got some separate help on how to use that. And if we come into the quote, very similar again, we've got all our different view selectors. We can add tags, we can bulk update things, or we can delete records from this point. So this is just my test system, and I've got a couple of hundred records spread between these three areas. So how do we then make sense of that on a day-to-day basis? So again, filters are the answer. So in here, I've got a couple of predefined filters. So I can quickly see all the accepted quotes. I can quickly see all the current quotes in the system. This one's going to show me all of the lapsed quotes. These are the quotes that haven't been accepted yet. And I've got a couple of private filters so that I can have a list of my own quotes to follow up. So I'm doing well and I don't have any in there. What we'll also want to do is set up filters in orders. So show me everything that's on back order, show me everything that's been invoiced, show me all of the ones that need to be invoiced. So you can see how I can break down this chunk of information into usable sort of lists that I can work through on a daily basis. So shipped orders that need to be invoiced, and I can combine different layouts for different filters if I want to. So for invoiced orders, maybe I want to go and apply the shipment layout to it. So it's the same story with invoices here. So if we come back into the list view, I've got a layout that I'd applied there. So we'll go back to the standard layout. I want to see all the paid invoices in the system. I want to see ones that are partially paid. I want to see ones that are unpaid. And in here, I can also have a view. These are the invoices that I need to follow up for this week, and I don't have any, so that's fantastic. So we want to be able to break down what's going on in these areas so that users can log into the system each day, work through a list of things that they need to tick off, and then we're done. So setting up filters and layouts is going to make that process much, much easier on a regular basis, and especially also when it comes to your shipments. So in here, I've got a view for my orders to be picked, ones that are packed, orders that have been picked, and orders that have been shipped. So I can really quickly bring that up, and I can also print picking lists in bulk. So I could basically go and select all of these ones that need to be picked, select those and go print picking list. So what that's doing is generating me a PDF document for each of the orders that I've selected. So I'll come back to that in a second. I can also add tags, I can delete things from here, and you can see now I've got all of my picking lists in a nice neat PDF. So payments would be the same. We could basically have different filters for payments based on whether they were successful or whether they failed, payments that need to be followed up or there's a problem with. So we can basically sort them by the method of payment if you've got that linked to an accounting system. So one of the most important things to say in closing is that once you've gone through the sales process, if your CRM is linked to an accounting system, we want to make sure that the data is flowing between CRM and MyOb and Xero on a regular basis in the right directions at the right times. So we want to make sure that daily we're pushing our invoices out from CRM to the accounting system. We're also bringing our payments in from accounting to CRM. If we're taking payments in CRM via Stripe, eWay, or Easy Debit, we'll also want to push our payments out from CRM to the accounting system on a daily basis. So we basically want to make sure that all of the sales that we're performing in CRM are then synced with the accounting system so that it's got the information that it needs to do its job. So once you've connected your accounting system in integrations here, you'll be able to go in and access the settings, which will allow you to configure the data sync schedule between those two systems. So we've got some guidance online for that as to how you should set that up. But that brings us to the end of the crash course in the CRM sales process.